Hi, my name is Maddux Green, and today I'm going to be discussing the 2022 Iowa general elections. So we're going to start out by looking at some key issues and facts. So Iowa is located in the Midwestern region of the United States with a population of approximately 3,190,369 representatives. The state is historically Republican. However, that's not to say that we haven't seen some Democratic representation in the past. We can see here that through the early 2000s and the late 10s, it has been historically Democratic, but in 2011, there was a general shift to predominantly Republicans. This could be due to the fact that the United States has created a huge polarization of political identification, as well as the state being 85% farmland, which could contribute to the fact that Republican representatives cater more towards those who are involved in agriculture. So that could also be a reason why we have seen so much Republican representation. And I think that this election is also very important because it's the first time we've had a general election since the 2021 redistricting of Iowa, and so that's going to show a huge, it's going to play a huge key role in how the House of Representatives elections turn out. So if we continue to look at these key issues, we can see that the congressional partisanship breakdown from Iowa in Congress is 5-1, so 5 Republicans, 1 Democrat, which is not surprising, but I think that's really interesting to see. We also can look at some demographic data to see that a majority of the voters in Iowa are white, with an 89.1% white population. And then moving on, if we look at the right side of the screen, we can see the congressional districts before redistricting as well as after redistricting. And we still have those 4 districts. They're just made up a little bit differently as far as like region and population go. So if we look at our current offices held, we can see we have our governor, 2 senators, and 4 House of Representatives. And the only thing that is not up for election is this 1 senator spot. So let's jump into the elections. Running for Senate, we have Republican incumbent Chuck Grassley, and he is running against Democratic candidate Michael Franklin. The 3 main issues that they've been discussing are abortion rights, insulin prices, and the KISS. So Chuck Grassley is anti-abortion. He actually believes that the right to abortion should be delegated amongst the states, and is not doing anything in his election to support abortion rights. However, Michael Franklin is extremely pro-abortion and believes that abortion should become a codified federal law. So those are 2 very different opinions about abortion rights that are going to determine voters' behavior up at the polls. We also have insulin prices, which is a very key factor, and Chuck Grassley has blocked a $35 cap on insulin, which was a bill passed in Congress during his time served as a Senate, and that just, I think, shows that he isn't really doing anything to fight these insulin prices when he actually could have. And Michael Franklin also believes that the insulin prices should be lowered. Now, the KISS that I'm referring to is a scandal involving Michael Franklin and a woman who claims that she did not want to be kissed by him and it was unconsensual, and this is actually harming his campaign quite a bit, as Chuck Grassley is using it to politicize his campaign and show him paint him as a bad person. In fact, this scandal has been debunked and shouldn't be relevant in this election, but of course it is. And we can see here that the incumbent Chuck Grassley is most likely going to win again. Solid Republican, likely Republican. These are all polls that have shown that voters are mostly going to choose Chuck Grassley, the incumbent Republican. Moving on to the House of Representatives, like I said, this is extremely important because of the redistricting that just occurred in Iowa. So we have District 1, which is being, the candidates are Mariana Miller Meeks, who's our Republican incumbent, and Christina Balhan. Mariana Miller Meeks is the incumbent for District 2, but due to redistricting, she's running for representative of District 1. And Bohanna ran in 2020 for District 1 representative and lost. So I think that these are two key factors that are important and are going to play an important role here, as we have an incumbent running, and Christina Bohanna has already lost the election once. So we can see here that Miller Meeks is winning by a 1% margin, and this was as of April and June and July, so I'm sure there has been a lot that has changed, but I couldn't find any other data to support this. Looking at District 2, we have Ashley Henson, who's a Republican incumbent, and Liz Mathis. Some issues that we're going to be touching on are incumbency, redistricting, and partisanship again. So, like I said, if we go back here, Miller Meeks was the Republican representative of District 2 in 2020 up to 2022. So we can see that there's a general Republican partisanship there. And due to the redistricting, we can predict that Ashley Henson, the Republican, will most likely win the representation of this district as well. As Marinette Miller won in 2020. However, there has been a significant Democratic dominance up until 2020, as this district is part of the Quad Cities, which are major cities. And if we know anything about voting in major cities, we know that most populated cities are more Democratic and more rural environments are Republican. So that having the representation of Davenport and Brittenhoff in Iowa shows a huge difference here, but the polls are showing that it is going to most likely be a Republican representative that wins this District 2 election. District 3 is the most interesting out of all of these representation elections, in my opinion, as this is the battleground. This is probably the most competitive House election that Iowa is facing, and that is between Zach Nunn and Cindy Axan. Axan's the Democratic incumbent, which is interesting as she's the only Democratic representative in Congress right now, which could change, but we're going to look at some of the issues and what they've discussed before. So inflation is a huge issue that Axan is discussing. She's supporting the Inflation Reduction Act, and that taxes large corporations and uses that tax to pay for the inflation costs. And she also wants to lower the prescription costs, which would be very effective for her citizens in District 3 that use prescription medicine. But Zach Nunn has actually not really discussed too much. He really wants to make meaningful tax cuts to help with the inflation rates, but he hasn't directly said anything to help with inflation rates. He also believes that investing in American energy will fix the supply chain workforce and hopefully get our inflation levels back to a median. However, they do both have differing opinions on guns as well. Axan believes that there should be an assault rifle ban on these guns, which I think is kind of an interesting point versus Zach Nunn, who hasn't discussed anything about gun control and actually wants to use funding to pour into police officers and use them as a form of gun control rather than controlling the rights of actual citizens. And so these are two different views on this issue that could play out and affect how voters behave at the polls. District 4 is our final district, and there's not too much to discuss here. It's again, the key issues are incumbency and partisanship. So our incumbent here is Randy Finstraw. He's a Republican incumbent, and he's running against Ryan Melton for representation of District 4. But we can see here that the incumbent is most likely going to win, as the district is relatively Republican, and they're going to want to keep the same representation. And finally, we have our our gubernatorial elections, and this is between Dee DeJere and incumbent Republican Representative Kim Reynolds. So the three issues that they've been focusing on through their elections are workforce shortage, education, and abortion. So if we start by looking at our governor, Kim Reynolds, the polls are showing that she has a 17% lead over Dee DeJere, which is pretty significant, but this could change and it could go either way. The way that Kim Reynolds wants to improve workforce shortage is by cutting employment back in 2018, she cut employee benefits or unemployment benefits with the hopes of these rewards that people receive for being unemployed. Without those rewards, people would be more likely to work, and we haven't really seen that plan work that well anymore, so I'm interested to see if she does win re-election that something else is going to be in place. But she also has created many academic programs and used pandemic aid to fund those programs, which provide internships, job opportunities, and apprenticeships for students, so this would be more likely to push them into the workforce. However, Dee DeJere wants to offer retention bonuses as a way to help with the workforce shortage. She also wants to go back to the education system through kindergarten and build back by investing in the children. So basically teaching them how to be good citizens and good workers from the beginning. She also wants to raise the minimum wage price to an unspecified number, which I think is a good idea in plan, but once you actually put it into practice, it's a lot more difficult, especially with a historically Republican state and a lack of government funding there. As far as education, Kim Reynolds claims that she's pro-parent, which is an advocacy for her school choice bill, which allows students to choose if they want to attend private or public school and use the funding that they would have received for private school or for public school to put into private school, which I think this is very original, but I'm not really sure how well that's going to work, and I think it's kind of a very strange way to run and to get votes if you think this is going to be your plan, but that's just my opinion. Dee DeJere also has the same opinion and strikes down her future ready or her school choice bill, but DeJere wants to offer universal preschooling for all children, which would be very expensive as well in a state with a lack of government funding. And she also wants to increase funding by 4% for schools, which is nearly double Kim Reynolds' previous percent of 2.5. And finally, discussing abortion, Kim Reynolds wants to reinstate the law in Iowa that bans abortions up to 6 weeks. So clearly she's not running for abortion rights and abortion activism in her campaign. But Dee DeJere is, and she wants to protect the right to choose and protect a woman's right to vote, or protect a woman's right to choose her own bodily autonomy. So I also think that this is the most interesting poll in candidates that we have because they're both two very different women, two both very powerful women, which is something that we haven't really seen a lot in politics, but they both have very different views on these hot button controversial topics. And I think it's interesting to compare those two. So we can see that Reynolds has a pretty high lead in the race, but I think DeJere is up there. She has some good ideas, and I think that she might be able to have a chance or have a place somewhere else in government. But these are my works cited, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation today. Thank you.